Cool. Okay, so hello. My name is Jack James, and I'm a filmmaker. I was asked to come here today to speak with you all about video production and video content, which can be a pretty open-ended subject in terms of areas of discussion. So, as Ben had mentioned just a moment ago, one thing I'd like to suggest is that if you do have any questions as we go along, or if there's anything that I talk about or speak about that you'd like me to expand upon, know a little bit more on, or you're really annoyed hearing me continually talk about something, just give me a shout and let me know, and we can discuss it at greater length at that point. Most important thing for me from today's session is that you hopefully leave with some confidence about video creation and with some fresh ideas to take forward following the session. So, video content. But first of all, we're going to talk a little bit about my background in filmmaking, because I think that will be helpful to everyone in terms of knowing where I came from and where it is you guys can come from too. We're going to talk a little bit about what video production actually is and what it can be used for. We're also going to talk about things to film and what to film, a little bit about how to film, which, you know, could be, we could change that dependent on how much you guys have done and how much you guys have already done in the past. And then we'll talk a little bit about collaboration as well. So, yeah, we'll get stuck in. So in terms of my background, please don't let that statement scare you, and do still trust me and be assured that this will still be informative and helpful. But my background was not really in film. And I think it's important that you guys know this, because one of the big things I want to try and do from this talk is demystify video production and filmmaking to a certain extent, and make you aware that it is an accessible and valuable tool which can be learned and experimented with. You know, there's a lot of people who come to video production and who come to me and feel a little bit daunted by the prospect of it for a multitude of different reasons, but it really doesn't have to be that way. It can be an exciting, invigorating and liberating thing to be able to do. And especially for you guys, it can be, it can open up so many different kind of pathways and avenues for you and your own businesses. So, yeah, I didn't come from a film background. I actually came from a fine art background. I went to university to study art and loved it, but you know, soon wanted whatever it was I was painting and drawing to start moving. So I started filming paintings and making them into stop motion, and then got into actual stop motion animation myself as well, with the aim of always looking to eventually work with people. I was quite shy in a typical fine art student, probably. I spent a lot of time in my cellar making animations, which, you know, isn't good for anyone really. I smelt like mold, and it was very damp down there, so it probably wasn't particularly helpful or healthy. But yeah, eventually I managed to start working with people and collaborate with people and working in a lot of different kind of areas of film. I ended up being involved in a couple of narrative feature films as an editor and shooting behind the scenes content, which was really great, because it was a little bit of my film school kind of there in terms of seeing mostly how not to make a film in that instance. But that was a really handy kind of learning curve. And then eventually I started to get into more corporate-based work, and I've spent the last 8 years as a creative director at a production company, which is really great, because it means I've got a kind of wealth of experience and know a lot about each part of the process. If you're kind of in that kind of role, creative director is a little bit of a made-up role for me, really, because it just means like I can be lumbered with anything and everything. But that is great, like I said, because it means you're involved in the script writing process and the coordination process and the filming itself, and then the direction itself. So yeah, I think a mixture of having that kind of narrative experience and the corporate work experience is something that's very useful in terms of being able to speak to you guys about what does work and what doesn't work, and kind of pitfalls and things to avoid when you start to generate your own video content. And also just, you know, in terms of, I think it's good for you guys to know I didn't come from that background, but am now quite firmly in that industry. Yeah, so video production. What is video production? I know that you all likely know what video production is and what it entails, but I think it's a question worth covering. Again, if only to try and kind of simplify it, go back to the basics and foundations of what it really is at its core. So sometimes it's sometimes with something like film and video production, it can be easy for a kind of task or a proposition put before you to appear kind of insurmountable. And video production, knowing where to start and what it is, it almost presents itself as a bit of an abstract puzzle from time to time. I've spoken to lots of people who find the idea of creating video content or even speaking about their own video content and what it is they might want incredibly daunting. Sorry, Ben.
Oh, hello, sorry.
Oh, sorry, did you say something?
Oh, sorry, I didn't realise I wasn't muted at that end. Sorry, I unmuted myself. My apologies, buddy.
No, that's fine. I just, thank God you didn't say anything you shouldn't.
No, that's amateur hour. Sorry, my apologies, buddy.
No, it's fine. Yeah, I think some people, when they approach video content and video creation, I've known people to say they find it daunting, and I think this is for a number of reasons. And some of that is probably around budget and the fact that that's always kind of shrouded in mystery in terms of how much something like that costs. You get opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of what feels right or not. Some people are far too expensive for some people, and then some people get a very cheap, cost-effective price and think that's just too cheap to expect anything of of any worth from. But I think some of it is also likely based around a vulnerability of actually putting yourself out there in video form, and intimidation of the technological aspects involved. I think the other thing is the pressure to keep up with various trends and to ensure you're making a certain type of film. We will talk a little bit about terminology and types of films in greater detail a little bit later, but right now I think it's important to not concern ourselves with that and just focus on what's at the heart of video production. So going right back to basics, video production at its core is an effective form of storytelling. It is a strong medium to engage an audience and inform them of something. So it is so effective because many of us have lived a life where television and film have an enormous role in our lives. It's something that's brought families together in the evenings, and it's something that can bring the nation together when a large-scale event is happening. It's also now something we are presented with on an incredibly frequent basis online and most frequently on our phones. Its significance in people's lives mean that as a way to digest information or to be entertained, it's already established itself as a recognizable and reliable source. When we look at how to make video production, or even where to just get started, it can absolutely be a daunting thing, as I said. But I think the simplest way of looking at exactly where to start is to remind yourself that you're not just a creator, but you're also a spectator. You're an audience member, and you yourself, no doubt, consume film. So think about what it is you'd want to see as opposed to what you think others might want to see. You're using video production to share something that all you guys have created. So try to share in a way that you'd want it to be shared to yourselves. In one respect, you're sharing a part of yourselves. So think about how you want to appear and how you want your audience to feel when they're presented with this part of you. So what to film and where to start? Lots of people start from extremely different places. And in my mind, where we're going to start right now isn't really the right place to start. But what it does do is give us something tangible to think about in terms of actual content when I speak about where the actual best place to start is. And from having spoken to many people over the years who ask me about video content, they often come with a type of film or an approach to filming in mind before they actually have an actual idea of what they want their film to say. So let's all start in the wrong place together and go through these types of films. Firstly, it's important to separate the approach to filming from the type of film you are looking to make. Often when I speak to clients and people who want video content, there can sometimes be a murky crossover between approaches and types, which can be confused further by the ever-changing names of video trends. Whether you're making an explainer video or brand content or a social media video, they all require a certain approach, and this can take on many forms. Also, like on that note, you're constantly, or I find myself, whenever I look into video production, look at things that are trending in video production, you're always confronted with new terminology and new names for things, as I've mentioned a couple of times. Like deep down, it's all the same. So like, don't let yourselves get too kind of frustrated by it or too concerned by it, because you're all trying to do the same thing, which we'd mentioned previously, which is telling a story and engaging your audience and informing them of something. They just give it lots of names to dress it up and make it sound more complicated than it is, but it isn't that complicated. So to try and keep this element even simpler, I'll focus on a set of common and easily accessible approaches that could be worth considering as something to work towards for your first few pieces of video content. So first of all, we've got a PTC, which is a piece to camera. This is when a person has a camera set up directly in front of them and talks directly to their audience. There's also live action filming, which is where we use real footage filmed ourselves of a given object. It could be, of a process, or it could be of a product that you've got, or it could be of your offices and your workspace. Live action filming with graphics and text, which is the same as live action filming, but with static graphic and text work to help convey some precise messaging, or to include a call to action so that your viewers and audience know where to go after they've consumed your video content. Live action filming with animated graphics and text, which is the same as the above again, but with a more eye-catching and advanced approach to conveying precise messaging. I would imagine you'll probably see much more of this than anything else through social media channels and the like. The other option is to have stock footage with any of the above, which is where you source stock material filmed by others to craft a story and edit, which is actually something that's becoming more and more popular as stock footage becomes better and better over time. And then there's animation, which is a medium which is created completely from scratch using drawn elements that help represent your message as opposed to actually and actively showing what it is you do. So, which of these approaches is right for you? It depends on exactly what it is you want to say and exactly how it is you want to put yourself out there. There's lots of different things you can do with each of these approaches, obviously. I think I mentioned much earlier on this morning that, it really is limitless in terms of what you can do with video and how you can present your video content to people. So we'll go through each one just very briefly to talk a little bit more about what you can do with each one. And piece to camera, one of the most popular types of films to be made with that is probably vlogs and vlogging. You see a lot of that through YouTube and all the social media channels of people just speaking directly to camera about any given subject. There's also, explainer films. You can do your own interviews, or you can even go live with a piece to camera to talk about an event or something that's actually happening in that moment. It also lends itself really well to longer form storytelling, which is something that's been becoming more popular over the last few years, especially as the kind of climate around the world has changed slightly in terms of people's sensibilities and how they like to digest certain content. You can also do testimonials, so that could be with your clients or customers, and announcement films and event videos. Again, it really is kind of limitless in terms of what you can do, but with this, the piece to camera, whether it's you or somebody else, is going to be the thing that really drives the narrative for these types of films. With live action filming and live action filming with graphics and text and with animated graphics and text, you can cover a wide range of different things, from brand films to product teasers, corporate films, explainer films, experiential films. They're all variations, again, of the same thing. It's storytelling, it's conveying your messages, but with a very slight, subtle kind of shift into a different direction. Where things do become slightly different is where you might be looking at explainer or education or instructional films. Again, it's all with the same sort of approach, but there is a little bit more of a different kind of approach to how you'd craft the driving narrative. So it might be through the script or through the text or through the graphics. There's a different way of positioning your messaging to ensure that you're actually instructing people and actually explaining people. And then with stock footage, a lot of people are using stock footage to create brand films, event films, and again, longer form storytelling. Stock footage lends itself well because you can get footage from anywhere in any kind of region, and bring that to the table and use that to tell your story. So it's a really flexible way of building upon any footage you may already have or a story you've already got to tell. And then animation lends itself particularly well to explainer films, infographics, and instructional videos, because animation, for the most part, is used to create something that maybe isn't so tangible. There's a lot of software companies that use it. There's a lot of and technology companies who use it as well, to great effect. So they're really useful for that kind of thing. So what makes video content engaging? Well, first of all, it's helpful to not get too bogged down in the above, which I keep saying when taking the first steps. But the reason it is worth discussing them and speaking about them openly is that when you search for information on video production, it's a bombardment of words and advice and trending styles and a long list of things you should be making because they're popular. And the way in which a lot of it is described is pitched in business jargon that can leave people second guessing whether they're doing the right thing or not. So when you're first starting this journey and just beginning to piece together how to approach video content, I strongly encourage developing an honest and open approach to your video content. And what I really mean by that is ask yourself really honest questions and give yourself honest answers about what you want your content to actually do and why it is you want to make it. I speak to people day in, day out who have come to me for video content because they've been told they should, or that they know they need to. And that's fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with coming to the table only knowing that you need something. But before we take a step forward and begin filming what we think we should be filming, it's best to hold tight a moment and really consider what it is you're making before starting to make it. There's a lot of people who jump the gun maybe slightly too early, because they feel the pressure that they should be doing something. And yeah, it's good to just slow it down slightly and get it right. So yeah, you should ask yourself, why do you want to make it? Is it to create awareness of a new product? Is it to inform people of a process? Is it to generate new business? Whichever of those it is, it all results in the same thing, which is an audience. It's all going towards a set of people. So you should have a think about your audience and take time to consider who your audience might be. Have a think about how old they might be, what backgrounds they may come from, and what would be the best way to actually speak with those people if they were here with you in person right now. And also consider how you want those people to feel coming away from your video. Do you want them to feel more knowledgeable about what it is you do? Do you want them to come away feeling in a more buying frame of mind? Or do you want them, or do you want to just leave a lasting impact, which means they'll come back for more in the future? Are you trying to kind of inform people and instruct people, or just create a stronger presence for yourself? Have a think about how you want people to feel coming away from your content. So yeah, in recent years, long form storytelling, vlogging, and more personalized content has soared and succeeded in the marketplace. And people, you know, to a certain extent, have always loved people. And they look for the human in everything, and they look for the heart and soul in anything. So with that in mind, I think it's absolutely vital that you really put yourself into your content. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you yourself have to actually be on camera. It just means that whatever you're creating needs to come from a deep and honest place. And you shouldn't be afraid to put yourself into that. You've put enough of yourselves into your actual businesses and to your products. So it's important for that to shine through your video content and make it as close to you and your own vision of yourself and your company as you can be. It's representative of you and what you want to give to the world. So I think it's absolutely vital that you put yourself into it. So I'm very aware that I have just chatted relentlessly at you for a period of time there. Is everybody okay? Does anybody have any questions at this stage they'd like to ask? Feel free to just remain silent for like 10 seconds and I'll carry on. Okay, question for later, in which case I will answer that later. But thank you very much. Yeah, we'll come to that later for sure. So, okay, what to film? So now knowing that we need to put ourselves so readily into our content, and also now having a bit of an idea of different approaches, types of films we can produce, the next most important things would be developing your idea, creating a effective plan to execute your idea, and begin to practice and experiment with those ideas to achieve the desired results. So take your time, take a breath, and put work into a solid idea. You can potentially spend just 5 minutes filming the content you are looking to actually create, but it's vital that you spend the time beforehand ensuring it's the right kind of content that is going to communicate to your audience in the way that you want it to. Developing an idea of a clear vision is important. And it's fine to start small and build up from a safer place rather than diving in head first. There's no real right or wrong place to start conceptually. I think just starting is the most important thing, and starting in a considered and well-constructed place is important. So the most effective strategies are built, video strategies I'm talking about, sorry, are built from suites of content. So it's important when you are developing your idea not to try and cram everything you may want to say about your business or your product into one long video. There is a time and a place for long form content, and as I said earlier on, it is something that is becoming more and more popular, but for very specific types of films. And I think there are also things that are becoming more and more popular with an established audience. So if you've already got that audience there and you've already got that platform and you've got them on board, then pushing forward longer form content will just be received far greater. So yeah, and also you can use longer form content earlier in your journey as well for things like tutorials or instructional videos. You know, those films that can sometimes be a necessity for them to be longer form. And there's also longer form documentary style film work that it can work really effectively for. But even those longer form examples are often supported by shorter form supplements, which are released to the public to engage viewers and draw them to the longer form content. Again, it's really short and sweet and bite-sized kind of content, little nuggets of ideas and pieces of yourself in your work are the things that are really going to wake audiences up and engage them and start to get them interested in what it is you're going to do. you know, if you go to a party and you talk to somebody and they just talk at you relentlessly for an hour, much in the same way I am now, so apologies, the chances are you're going to be pretty sick of that person by the end of it. So, but you know, you just bit by bit give them a little bit. Don't dive in too far and too long. So yeah. It's the same with anything. If you think back to the first time you heard a band that you love, it normally starts with one song before you dive deeper into an album's worth of material. So think about it in that kind of context, you know, and whet the appetite of the viewer and leave your audience wanting that bit more and wanting to come back and feeling the need to actually check back on your channels and check back on your pages to see what it is you're up to next, rather than trying to tell them everything you want to all at once. At the end of the day, if they do like your voice and like what it is you do, then they'll stick around and they'll come back. So with that in mind, I normally try to stick to these main principles when dealing with any project to help identify the essentials of video content. And it's these set of questions here. What is your main message? This question is going to dictate what kind of film you end up making and what your collection of images is there to try and actually tell the world about. And secondary messages, you know, it could be that you have a supporting message alongside your main message. For instance, you could have a product coming out next month. And a supporting message for this might be the fact that it's cost effective within a certain period of time, or that it's made from a specific material, or that it's environmentally friendly, or that there are other fringe benefits to buying this particular product. What is your brand? It's important that whatever your content is feels like yours. So considering your brand colors and logos and ways in which they can be manipulated or used. Oh, hang on, I'm just going to admit someone. It's new to the admitting thing. I'm not normally made the host. It's quite a privilege, so apologies for that. Consider your brand colors and logos and ways in which they can be used within video, because it's really important to make sure that those things are there, and that your brand presence is being developed throughout all of your content. If we're looking to create content that's engaging, then we need to arrive with a film that has presence, and you need to be felt through that video. The film wants to feel explicitly like it could only come from you. And you want a film that stands out from the crowd, so use your brand for this. There's so much material out there at the moment. I think there's something like 500 hours of footage uploaded to YouTube every minute or something. So these things are all things that can help you stand out from the crowd in terms of just being succinct and sharp with your messaging, and impactful with your brand kind of presence throughout. I'd also suggest doing some research, and looking at some of the videos made by larger brands and seeing the patterns that arise between different films of theirs. Somebody like Apple keeps things consistently clean, crisp, and minimal, much like their own product. And throughout all their content, they've created identifiable visual language, which extends their video content and other content that they put out there. And other people lean into tone, and lean into engaging viewers through humor or even through sensuality. You've only got to look at Specsavers for the kind of humor aspect of it, or Marks and Spencer's for the kind of sultry approach to to food and various bits and pieces. But they're all recognizable as belonging to those brands, and so it's easy to almost instantly recognize who it's coming from, what it is they're going to be talking about, and what their kind of ethos is as a brand. So yeah, you can use this yourselves to start to create a visual language through use of color and graphic work, and having your content aligned across different mediums and different platforms will only make your online presence look more impressive and trustworthy. And again, will go a long way to help engage your viewer. making sure things like your Vimeo or YouTube channels are all branded alongside your videos just makes everything look and appear that bit cleaner, that little bit clearer, and just more eye-catching. And it doesn't have to be extremely complicated. It could be something as simple as an effective placement of a logo or a brand marking that makes this work within a video. It doesn't have to be overly flashy or anything like that. So yeah. The brand can also end up being developed and built upon through video content, which is something I've had happen in the past, where branding for a client has been quite minimal or even slightly dated. But being able to develop styling through video gave a fresh perspective to look at everything, from which has helped keep things fresh or take things in different directions in the past. It can essentially just give you a different perspective and a different way of looking at things. So yeah, it's well worth taking a look at. And considering what you do and what you don't like. Knowing what you do and don't like about a certain video can be an enormously helpful way of being able to steer clear, to steer things in a certain direction, and also steer clear of certain things that you don't actually like to see in video content. It's very easy to make mistakes and to actually, do something you don't like because you're sort of automatically going through the process of doing what you think is the right thing to do. So yeah, it's well worth taking time to consider what does and doesn't work for you in other people's video content. These questions, they're not always vital, and they're sometimes difficult to answer, but it could be the difference in terms of reminding yourself of a route not to go down with it, So yeah, hopefully if you're able to take these questions away and answer them, they'll help give you a breakdown for a piece of video content, so that you can now focus on the fun part, which is how you plan on actually bringing these together to form your idea. And it's at this point that I'd really encourage people to begin to collaborate, because collaboration is just an enormously important part of the filmmaking process. And it's so easy when you're creating something to get tunnel vision on an idea, or to think you've got a concept nailed down and to venture forward without asking for anybody else's thoughts. And at the same time, don't get me wrong, it can work jumping ahead and going for it, but there's no harm in taking another moment, an extra moment, to just ask someone else's thoughts about an idea or something you're considering doing. It's just important to know what to take away from collaboration. And I find the most effective collaborative relationships come from as honest a place as you possibly can. So I've been in situations in the past where I've created films that take certain creative risks, and that can leave you as a creator in a slightly vulnerable position. So it's important to have someone whose opinion you trust and who you can talk to openly about what it is you're making. Personally, I've worked with an art director for 15 odd years now, who relentlessly forces me to justify every element of something I've written for screen, and I'm even considering filming before we've even got there. And I've always gone into those discussions with the mindset of, if I can't justify it, then I shouldn't do it. And for this kind of approach, it could be, a fresh set of ears or eyes can help just tighten or sharpen an idea, or build upon what you've already proposed in a helpful and creative way. But yeah, for me, the having to justify everything is really useful for me personally. You also, even if you do collaborate and put forward your ideas to people, you don't have to take other people's advice, but it's important to listen to others, and to teach yourself to try to push yourself to discuss the process openly, because the main thing is for whatever you create to resonate with others. Is your audience, and it's your audience that is the most important factor in your video making journey, because you're making it for them. So it's important to collaborate early and to listen to those people, but also to listen to your audience as they feed back on your content and as they engage with it. And as you start to figure out what does and doesn't work and what they do and don't like. So I'd really encourage you to try to start that part of the journey early and help one another. I've had a few things in the chat. I'm just going to very quickly take it on. Okay, so I've done various live talking to camera videos on Facebook and Instagram. I hate doing them. Any tips for getting over that? Also have to do some pitching or intro type videos about the brand, and often use a teleprompter app so I can everything that I need to say clearly. Any tips for this? So Ben, I don't know if you guys have seen this in the chat, but Ben's addressed this already and had a look and said he's found a teleprompter app which can be really useful, helps keep you on message, stops you losing your place, and focuses your eye in the right place to keep looking direct into the camera. Ben, I wish you told me about this teleprompter app before I got cracking today. That'd have been really handy. But good to know for the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can understand. I can totally understand you hating doing them, Ismay. It's not an easy thing to do, and I think it's one of those things where it's a bit like you've got to tear off the plaster, dive in, and just give it a go, and keep going with it. Because if I'm sure you're incredibly passionate about what it is you're doing, and you know a lot about what it is you do. So I think just the more you push yourself to just talk to people and put yourself out there and actually go through that process again and again, it will start to feel and become more natural. It's not an easy thing. And also, like, people, when they are doing live talking on Facebook and Instagram, I think people are a lot more forgiving, actually, if it's something that's live rather than something that's been filmed ahead of time. So I think you've got there's a lot more license nowadays for things to feel a little rough around the edges or feel a little bit ad hoc, especially considering the direction video content took in the last couple of years with lockdown and throughout COVID. A lot of kind of quality control and what people expect from video content in terms of quality really did change quite drastically. So as much as you hate doing them, I think the only way to probably, or one of the best ways to get over that, is to just keep going and just keep doing it, which is probably not what you want to hear. So really sorry about that. You might just want to focus on Ben's answer about the teleprompter. But yeah, it's something worth considering. I've worked with loads of people over a long period of time who do interviews and do pieces to camera and talking heads and things like that. And it's you see how people transform, and some people do get better if they're just given the space and time and take it a little bit easier on themselves when they're doing it. There's one poor guy I worked with a long time ago who I wasn't directing. I was just there in a creative capacity because I was working on the edits for these things. And the person who was directing, this poor guy, just before he'd even finish giving an answer, he'd be cut off and she'd be saying, "No, you need to do it in this way, this, and this." And like, he was just a shadow of a man by the end of it. He was just like, he was so broken by it all and just become worse and worse. And what he really needed was to just be able to get his own words out and get there in his own way. And actually his very first interviews were absolutely the best and the most believable and the most kind of charming and endearing and natural. And then he just, people tried to put words in his mouth and force it out in a certain way, and it just didn't work. And I think there's something to be said for people taking a more normal and naturalistic approach and just embracing who it is they are when they're putting their content out there. That. So I hope that helps. So what to film? Practice and experiment in part one. We've gone through the developing your idea and looking at these questions to try and narrow down exactly what it is you want to do. So now it's time to put some of this into action. just straight away and start actually making your video content. You may already be well versed in filming and creating video content already, but even if you are, I'd encourage you to aim to practice and experiment with how you intend on approaching your idea before your proper filming day anyway. Spend time getting to know your camera, and also getting to know your eye for detail, for composition and approach before you set out to make your proper content. And just quickly, I do come to this a little bit later, but in terms of camera, you know, there's so many kind of options out there now in terms of what to use. All of our phones have cameras in them that are insanely high quality, and you know, iPhones have even been used to create feature films on now. So there's plenty of options that are cost effective or hopefully readily available to you, whether it's a phone, tablet, or a computer. There's ways to create video content, hopefully with what it is you've got around you. And there's also other cost effective options as well, like DSLRs and cine cameras and GoPros, which we'll come to a little bit later anyway. But yeah, spend time getting to know whatever camera it is you're looking to use. Even if it is your phone and you've used it 100 times, your chances are you might now be using it in a slightly different way, in a slightly different context. So experiment and start to play around with composition and play around with how it is you want to approach your content. The moment you get the camera physically in your hands and start working your way around an object, it might be that you see something through the lens that you hadn't thought of when actually putting the initial idea together. And this kind of experimentation can help dictate a visual style, or sometimes it can even dictate a whole concept. So don't be afraid to experiment in these moments and try things out which you may not have planned for. When you're experimenting and practicing and doing these things, you don't have to share this footage with anyone. So you can afford to play around and not need to be concerned by imperfections at this stage at all. It's good to just get to grips with what it is you're working with. Beyond that, you know, it's good to begin thinking about experimenting with light. In filmmaking, like, light is one of your biggest friends. We'll come to equipment a little later, like I said, and discuss artificial light in a bit more detail, but definitely be prepared to play with light. And in these instances, look to paint with light. It's effective lighting can be the difference between your film standing out against others. And it's an often overlooked tool with video content producers. And you know, it is overlooked a hell of a lot. There's a lot of people that don't light at all, and you can tell it's not lit because it's so grainy and noisy and just feels quite dingy. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you've got somebody who's just got an LED light and is just blasting it onto whatever it is they're looking to film, and everything's a little bit overblown and feels a little bit harsh and uneven. There's ways to soften light and play with available light and really use that to make the most of your products and make the most of the things you're trying to get out there into the world. So experiment with that and spend time looking at that. On top of all that, it's really important to take note of how long things here actually do take you. You know, how long did it take you to get a shot that you actually felt happy with? And how long did it take to set up the shot? And how long did it take you to reset for the next shots? It's important to take note of these things because all these timings will help dictate your schedule for your actual filming day and help, you know, in the future, it will help you allocate adequate amounts of time to actually do these things when it comes to going out there on those filming days. So yeah, have some practice run throughs, get your material onto your computer and look through what you produced. Spend time taking a look at it and going through what works and what doesn't work, and be prepared to be really critical of yourself and ask yourself, if you saw this content online that you've created presented to you by somebody else, would you feel engaged, inspired, or excited watching it? You know, does your own content match your own standards of others? And I think that's a really good kind of rule of thumb to use when it comes to judging your own content and really looking at it as plainly as you possibly can. So whatever the idea, vision, or goal is, it's important to plan accordingly and consider contingencies as well, because plans for filming have a fantastic habit of changing, and things don't always go according to plan either. Effective planning will result in you being able to keep your mind at its most creative on the actual day of filming, and also keep your mind on track in terms of what it is you need to achieve. And because these things don't always go to plan, it's important to have the essentials down to be able to fall back on the actual day. So when it comes to planning, it's important to ask yourself these questions. What is it you're filming? I know that sounds silly, as you're there with your camera for one thing and one thing only, but actually arriving to a film shoot with prepared shot list and a script is vital. Even if you're not recording audio or having any voice work with your filming day, creating a visual script is a really useful way of just keeping on track of what you're doing in case things change or alter or overrun slightly. You can go back to the core of your ideas as a reference at any point. So shot lists and creative scripts, and even having your original concept there is really beneficial and really great, just to serve as a reminder. How are you going to make sure you film everything? First, I would highly recommend creating a rigorous schedule to work from on your day of filming. I know it sounds really boring, but it is really important to keep track of those things, because you can spend an hour, 2 hours setting up a shot and it looks absolutely fantastic and beautiful, and then you find out you've got to actually be out in 20 minutes and it takes 45 minutes to pack everything down. It's important to have that schedule there to really consider how long these things take and just keep you on track, really. And on the schedule, it's important to include things like location addresses for easy access on day of filming. If you're working with other people, then include their contact details and things like that. Just in case, for whatever reason, someone doesn't turn up, it's just easy to get in touch with them very quickly. Break the day down into times and set realistic deadlines throughout the day. Again, as I said previously, this is where taking note of how long things took during practice comes in handy, as you'll have a clear idea of the time needed for each shot and each setup. And in addition to your schedule, I would use a shot list to take notes on as you go, because things do occur and things do change, and they're handy to have when it comes to the edit part of the process, to refer back to and to look on, and to just keep on top of everything still. So where are you filming? It's important to it's important to check your location thoroughly ahead of your filming day for any environmental issues that might impact your filming. Some of this will come to light if you're able to practice or experiment in your actual location, but that isn't always possible. So the main thing to consider and look out for are things that can impact your visuals or things that can impact your sound if you're recording sound. So from a visual point of view, the main thing you want to look at is whether your location is actually visually pleasing, and helping you actually tell the story you want to tell. Does it fit your requirements? Are the colors right? Are you trying to make it look like something it isn't? If you are trying to do that, then are there any areas of your location you should avoid which will break the illusion? Your environment is on camera, and your location is essentially a character in your video. And it's helping you actually tell your story. So make sure it's telling your story the way you want it to. One other thing to look out for is the kind of light available in the space. First of all, you want to check for house lights and artificial lights. Some light fixtures can cause strobing or interference with film footage, especially if you intend on film with slow motion. And there's nothing more heartbreaking and soul-crushing than getting back after a full day filming and realizing that none of the clips are usable because it's got these artifacts on. So have a little check of that early on. It's also worth checking out the situation with natural light and whether that will cause you any actual issues on your day of filming. If the sun shifts around the building at specific times, or if you're relying on that as your main source of light, it's things to take a look at and really consider. If you're looking to record audio in the space as well, then it's really recommended that you actually go in and listen to the space in silence for a few moments to see if there's anything which will cause you problems later. Air conditioning units, traffic against single glazed windows, and planned construction works are enemy of the common sound man or woman. So do be sure to check for these elements in any live environments that you don't have control over. If you're filming outside of your own personal office, studio, or home, then it's important to ensure you also have correct permissions from your location to be able to record there. You can source like a really simple bog standard location release form online. Somewhere like Creative England or places like that have those readily available. And it's just important to make sure you get that signed and that you've got those released from the people who actually own the property. And it's also really important to make sure you get that signed before you actually arrive to do your filming, because asking for it afterwards, after you've accidentally broken something, the likelihood is they're not going to want to help you out anymore. So yeah, get that done in advance for sure. Who are you filming, or who is filming? If you're working with a team right away and looking to bring people together to help you make your content, it makes the above questions and solutions all the more important, so that everybody has everything they need to make sure they're where they need to be, and that they're there by what time, etc. But also it's vitally important to take your time to discuss the project with them in greater depth, and discuss with them what you're looking to achieve, and give them everything they need to be able to execute their role, whatever that may be, as effectively as possible on the filming day itself. Clear communication is absolutely key with this, so be sure to double check everything you have prepared for your shoot before handing it over to others. So yeah, time to take a deep breath. You've got your planning all sorted, and it's time to get ready for the next step, which is more practice and more experimentation. And the reason it's more this is that this is an element that should really be a continuous part of your workflow. Practicing and experimenting will lead you on to learn new things about your camera, new things about filmmaking, but also it will help lead you on to a new way of looking at your products and your brand and your messaging, and hopefully help you develop a distinct, strong voice through video. It's important to take risks and try new things, so don't be afraid to do that, and to test things out on your audience as well. Creating video content should be a living, breathing thing, not something you do once and hope that it works and then it's done. Because its results are incredibly unpredictable, and it's something that works best when it's organically developed and produced, which is why experimentation is just so important throughout the entire process. You know, to put this in a bit of context, it's worth considering the idea of making a viral video as an example. I've had so many people come to me saying they want me to make them a viral video and it doesn't work like that. It's viral, videos go viral because it's something that just happens organically, and it relies on a number of completely uncontrollable entities aligning in such a way that it causes a video to catch and spread like fire. You know, just Charlie bit my finger. Like, who made that and thought, I'm going to put this out there, this is going to get me some views? Nobody thought that. They just put it out there because it was weird and cute, and then however many million people watched it. You know, it's crazy. So yeah, it can be something subtle or unexpected which ignites the imaginations of the internet and causes that kind of strange cinematic chemistry. So push the medium and be prepared to push yourself out of your comfort zone, to strike the right chord and find the right balance for both you and your brand. So, how to film, finally. I'm sorry it's taken so long to get here. At this stage, are there any other sort of questions at this point? Is there anything anybody else would like to know? I know I had a question earlier on from Sarah, which I'd be happy to take a look at now, or take a look at later. Just give me a shout if so. Through the chat.
Looking at the question from Sarah, it appears to be talking about organising film clips ready to edit. So I almost wonder whether that's worth tackling when you get kind of the other side of shooting perhaps, and maybe that would be perhaps a more organic time to cover that question once you've made your way through the filming part perhaps.
Yeah, no problem. We can take a
Okay.
look at that then. Yeah, editing and software packages and everything is coming up shortly. So for sure, we can take a look at that then. So, how to film. um, some of this is going to sound really obvious and probably quite annoying, so apologies in advance. But um, the most important thing is to actually just get out there and do it. And I don't mean go out there and you'll start generating perfect content right away and that your videos will take off and be perfect, because that's unlikely to happen. Not impossible, it might happen, but it is unlikely, and that's fine. But what I really mean is it's important to just go out there and get experimenting. It's the only way to truly get to know your equipment and to start developing what's needed to generate the right kind of content. Whatever you go out and experiment with does not need to be shared, as I said previously. It's good to make mistakes and get things wrong, as it's a fantastic way to learn. But as I say from experience, just push yourself to try and experiment. I spent years scrabbling around in my cellar, making stop motion animations, and looking back now, like it's really strange to think I spent so long down there. But it was what I needed to get me from A to B. And you know what I always really wanted to do was be creating film with real people, about real things, and that was always my goal. So yeah, I wish I kind of knew that what I really need to do was just get out there and give it a go. So I urge you to just go out there and give it a go. And it could be that your first forays into video are an extension of things you're already producing. It could be an extension of your photography, or an Instagram account, or documentation of product development. But it's really important just to start to play with and incorporate film into your day-to-day, and you'll begin to pick up the skills necessary to create the content you desire. So beyond just getting out there and doing it, I've also compiled some helpful tips and advice for equipment to help get you started and help get you going. Within the film world and within the industry, there are a lot of filmmakers who are all about tech and not about content, and I am absolutely not one of them. If the last 2 years of COVID has taught us anything, it's that people are prepared to interact and engage with material that is rough and ready. It's providing the content is right, you know. So interviews conducted through Zoom, film shot on mobiles, and children interrupting news broadcasts become a thing of the norm. So having high spec equipment is absolutely not a necessity. Can be nice, but it doesn't mean that your story is going to work. You know, it's expensive equipment. It just means nothing if what you're saying isn't compelling or engaging. Which is why I've tried to put so much emphasis on those stages of the process as opposed to the actual filming stage, because there are so many people who just get a camera, shoot the thing, film the thing, and think they've done it. But it's just so important to really take your time and think about why you're doing it, and think about your voice, and really develop that before thinking it's done, you know. And your film in itself will get better over time, regardless of your limitations. And you'll learn more about what does and doesn't work while you experiment with the specific equipment you have. So we'll take a look at some tools that will hopefully be readily available to you, as opposed to the highest spec gear. So yeah, we'll talk a little bit about cameras, audio, lighting, software, which will be where the editing comes in, and different online resources that can really help you dive in properly. So I'm probably putting more emphasis on the camera aspect of the how to film section for two main reasons. The first being that you work in a visual field, obviously, and have visual businesses. So for me, it makes sense that you'd be looking at utilizing film to generate your content. But it's important to also realize that you're not limited by that. There are ways to create dynamic and eye-catching animation with photography of your products or processes, or drawn recreation of your products and processes. But I'd say the pathway to video content is potentially simpler with filming instead of animation, as animation can be incredibly complicated and fiddly. The second reason I'm putting more emphasis on film is that film trends are cyclical. And before COVID, it could be argued that animation had a much stronger share of the marketplace with corporate and business-oriented content. When the production company that I was working at, when we first went into the first lockdown, we'd anticipated that even more people were likely to go to animation for their messaging, as it didn't involve any risk with people meeting in person and would make messaging easier and potentially give content more longevity. There was a big argument at that point amongst clients about social distancing and use of masks in films, and whether that would date their films once all of this COVID stuff blew over. But the truth was that through lockdown, people's literal isolation meant that they were longing for video content involving actual people. It was the only way some people could connect with others, with co-workers, colleagues, partners, and loved ones. So there was actually, surprisingly, a huge demand for live action filming. Or if we couldn't do live action filming because of restrictions, it was orchestrating, managing, and editing self-film segments. And I don't think any of that's going to go away anytime soon, especially with other worldwide developments currently ongoing. So my prediction is that the demand for animation will diminish even further. On the run up to lockdown, animation really was taking the market share of video content, really from, as I said, from business oriented kind of work. But it really has diminished even more. But it will still be around and will be used, probably more frequently alongside live action filming to help reinforce messaging, so animated graphics and things like that. But video content, live action video content, is definitely at the forefront of people's plans for the moment. I think that's a really good thing. So, cameras. There are a number of options already available to most people. The main options being your phone, a tablet, or a computer. The camera on a phone now is absolutely incredible. The quality that can be achieved and the amount the image can be pushed is really breathtaking. Sometimes it's really easy to dismiss phone footage as looking terrible or blown out with light, or too grainy. But all of those issues can be improved with some careful lighting, and you're likely to run into the same kind of issues with broadcast-ready cine cameras too, if there wasn't enough light or too much light. So it's not a phone issue; it's a lighting issue and a user issue. It's just about, as I said, experimenting and practicing and learning how to use light, and maximize what it is you've got readily available. Most phones now are capable of 4K quality, which is more than enough for what you need to generate content for web. Predominantly HD footage is still used for web. Some people do use 4K on there, but HD is just that bit easier to access for people. The phone is great as well because it's portable, it's easy to use, and it's small, which is particularly handy if you're filming with other people. For instance, a testimonial with a happy customer or client. People can become intimidated and concerned once they're surrounded by a crew with enormous cameras and lights. So being able to approach them in a less intimidating way with your phone will make that kind of content much easier. Beyond phones, you've got tablets and computers. They're not quite as flexible or quite as dynamic in terms of quality, but they can be extremely useful and convenient, especially if conducting things like pieces to camera or vlogs or even instructional videos. A tablet or computer can give you everything you need in terms of a capturing device. Again, it also has an interface you're familiar with, same as a phone, and your files will automatically be on your computer, saving time and ingestion, so that you can just dive into the edit right away. A step beyond those devices, which could potentially be easily accessible, is to invest in a new or used camera. Camera costs have come crashing down a lot in recent years, which means it's much easier for people to get their hands on high quality camera equipment. A number of years ago, the market was probably, controlled by Canon and Nikon with DSLRs. So more and more people had access to HD, UHD, 2K and 4K footage through that. And also the DSLR had the advantage of being able to take advantage of photography lenses, so that it made things look that bit more pretty. It's that bit more beautiful in terms of the image you had there, because you had the ability to finally use those kinds of lenses. And the DSLR is still on the market and are still like great pieces of kit and fantastic cameras. and they're pretty easy to use. Like, their interfaces aren't too complicated, and there's plenty of stuff online to help talk you through them anyway. So they're really useful and good to start to work from. But now taken over from DSLR is the prosumer cine camera, which takes content creators just a step closer to cinema quality footage. The cine cameras have kind of far greater picture potential and much wider dynamic range for stronger color work. Something to maybe consider if you're a little bit more advanced on your video journey. Blackmagic is currently the most popular choice with that, and with good reason, as they also offer free editing and color grading software package that is incredibly high quality, which we'll come to shortly. There are plenty of great options with these types of cameras, and deciding on the right camera for you can be daunting given the amount of different views and wealth of information available for each camera. A lot of the time it comes down to affordability of accessories such as lenses, and also it comes down to personal preference. But yeah, there's a lot of potential with those cameras to create some really interesting stuff. And on top of that is the humble GoPro. Originally, GoPro was marketed for extreme sports or adventuring, but more and more it's getting used for different purposes now. In this instance, it could be great to help showcase processes involved in making products, as it's small and nimble enough to have on your person, as you can create an interesting or dynamic kind of positions to give fresh perspectives and exciting compositions. And it can also be used static for things like time lapses of events taking place over longer periods of time. So there's a lot of flexibility with the GoPro too. The other thing to bear in mind with film and when creating video is whether you should be filming horizontally or vertically. And a lot of this debate has now come up because people are consuming so much content now through their phones. And with the narrow frame size, people have adapted to create vertical content over horizontal content. And like with this, it's another thing that's easy to get bogged down by, but you should. There's no proper set of rules with regards to that, really. I still shoot horizontally, but shoot with the vertical in mind, and it's easy enough to adapt with some careful framing in edit your horizontal work, then turn vertical when it comes to putting it out on those platforms. The other thing to take a look at, and which can be really useful, is just going to the channels that you're planning on putting your content onto, and checking their specifications for sizes and frame size and upload, and that might dictate which we go down for that. So I do have some camera accessories to discuss, but I'm very aware of the time. So Ben.
Yeah, hey buddy, we can probably get away with running relatively close up to 4 o'clock, I should think. And then, I mean, I can see Charlene in the room with us now. So, I mean, if people are happy to just kind of run from this session, and we can stay in this room if you like, and just kind of continue straight into the next session, if that's easier for people, to give us a little bit more time. That gives you another kind of 17, 18 minutes or so before you need to be worrying too much, mate.
Yeah, sure. If everybody's happy with that, that's great. If people just want me to go, just had enough though, that's also fine.
No, absolutely not. Well, I'll in the background, I'll update the link that's on the jumping off point on the website, so that if anybody is joining us for that isn't with us now, obviously they'll still end up in the same place. But yeah, otherwise that's absolutely fine from my side, mate. We'll all just we can stay in this room and just run seamlessly straight into the session with Charlene whenever you finish, mate. If that gives you a few more minutes.
Okay, cool. No, that sounds great. Okay, so okay, so camera accessories. We've talked a little bit about what cameras are really great and good to take advantage of, and things you can do with that in terms of options. But camera accessories are also vitally important to just help elevate your offering and create something that, again, is that little bit more engaging. So if you're filming a largely static object over a long period of time, you want to invest in some form of tripod. which will help stabilize your image and provide a steadiness to your camera work, which your audience will really appreciate. This is especially important if you're looking to vlog or filming yourself one-on-one position. Being able to hand over the camera holding duties to something else so you can focus solely on your message and performance will be incredibly helpful to yourself, and will also prevent any lapses in camera work that can occur when holding a certain position over time. And, you know, multitasking could be a nightmare if you're trying to actually deliver properly. So yeah, you can get tripods of all sizes now. So no matter how small or large your production is, you can be covered from desktop tripods and gorilla pods for phones or lightweight cameras, right up to full-scale tripods for larger cameras. Gimbals are a fantastic piece of kit, which you can create really smooth, sweeping kind of camera movements with. Again, it really boosts your production value, adding that kind of camera work in there. And there's a wide range of different options and things you can get in terms of gimbals. You can get gimbals for phones and for GoPros now, and they're super smooth and really simple to use. It's literally, you know, plug and play with those. If you've got a DSLR or a cine camera, you can go down a Ronin route and get one of their gimbals, which are arguably a bit more complicated to use, but really effective and used widely throughout the industry as well. A slider is kind of similar to a gimbal. It just gives you those kind of really smooth pushes in and tracks away from objects and tracks across an object as well. So lends himself really well to things like product shots, you know, and studio work and things like that. It's a really great thing to take advantage of. And on top of things to help kind of dictate the type of shot you're doing, the other thing that's really important to take a look into and that can really elevate what it is you're doing is looking at different lenses. And you can even get, you know, different lenses for your phones now. You can get attachments that go onto the front of your phone to create shallow depth of field and stuff like that, to really have your products and have your subjects stand out from everything that's there in your frame. So so it's definitely worth checking out what lenses are available for whatever camera it is you're using. And as I said earlier, sometimes if you're looking and considering buying a DSLR or a cine camera, it's worth taking a look at lenses for that camera and seeing how expensive good ones are, and taking advantage of the reviews on those lenses as well, because people are brutally honest on Amazon and places like that. So scour through those and take the advice of others when it comes to those, because it's super useful. Lighting. So again, I mentioned earlier, you should never underestimate the power of good lighting to make your video content instantly more appealing and instantly more engaging. A common phrase used throughout cinema is paint them with light, and that's really what light is there for with film. It's not just about blasting an object or a subject with light so it's visible. It's about articulating that light and manipulating that light to provoke a specific feeling in your audience. So, you know, again, it's asking yourself the question, how do you want your audience to feel? Ask yourself this question again when lighting, because lighting really does set the tone of a video. With light, you're creating an environment for your business, and you're presenting your products or services with light as well. So, you know, do you want your audience to feel relaxed, or do you want them to feel kind of assured or dazzled? Do you want them to feel as though they're working with a crisp clinical company or an artisan creative company? All these questions, so I will help you decide on whether you should be using kind of natural light or existing light within a space, including household lamps, fairy lights, and things like that, or whether you should be using artificial light. And my personal preference is to use natural light or recreate natural light with artificial light, because sometimes just relying on natural light can be incredibly problematic, you know, given that the sun moves a lot and that we're in England, so it can be sunny one moment and absolutely miserable the next. So as much as using natural light is a fantastic thing, and you won't get a light stronger than the sun, having artificial lights there to be able to recreate that light should things change, and to keep continuity and consistency between shots as you go throughout your day is really, really important. And thankfully also now really cost effective as well. Again, a lot of this came out during COVID, and the market became overrun with options for that help for things like piece to camera pieces and things like that. You can get ring lights and LED lights that are really quite flattering. You know, again, you don't want to blast yourself or an object with light. You want to make sure it's a flattering lathering of light, and that it's actually making the most of your objects and your subjects. So have a little look around for different LED options online, and look at different ways you can manipulate those and use those to help tell your story and help engage your audience. And again, also with light, another thing that you can do is again boost your brand through your video using different colors and dictating the tone with it throughout. So absolutely spend time looking at different ways of lighting, and as always experiment with those different ways to light. So audio, another common saying throughout film is that people can forgive poor visuals, but if the sound's dreadful, they're going to switch off and go, which is really true. You know, it's mostly applicable to narrative work or films that rely on audio to drive their narrative. So if you're planning on doing vlogs, interviews, and instructional films using audio, then it'd be wise to invest in an appropriate microphone. And at the moment, I'd strongly recommend taking a look at different offerings from a company called Rode. It's RODE. They've got a lot of really cost-effective options for people in terms of on-camera booms or even podcast microphones. Really, really great quality and really easy to use. And the other thing to take a look at potentially is clip mics, because they can be a really handy thing to have, because you can plug those directly into your phone if you're going down the phone route, and they just instantly give you a really close directional mic, which will really help make sure your audio sounds as good as it possibly can be, because it will just be focusing on capturing your voice as opposed to capturing everything else going on in the background. And if you're not going to be using any kind of spoken word or any kind of voiceover or anything like that, then one thing to really consider is using music. And thankfully, you know, stock music used to be vile stuff, but now it's you can get really great content through places like Envato and Motion Array and things like that. So yeah, I'd strongly recommend looking through those kind of sites and making sure that you have some kind of audio throughout your video, because the audio can also help dictate tone and also dictate the pace of your edit as well. If you're cutting to music and you're cutting to sounds like that, you start to create a visual rhythm alongside that will instantly make your films that bit more eye-catching, and that have a really strong sense of energy about them as well. So that's something well worth considering. Which finally brings me on to editing software, which I know Sarah has mentioned. So I'm gonna, Sarah, if you're still there, I'm gonna take a look at your question now and look to give you an answer. I'm so sorry it's taken this long to get here, but okay. So just yeah, yeah, that sounds like a lot of hard work. So, Sarah, are you using a specific kind of editing software at the moment, or are you still looking at what kind of software to use?
I'm currently using iMovie,
Oh, okay.
but I will be moving on to using DaVinci
Hmm.
Resolve. So I think that's something you mentioned, the Black Magic.
Yeah, yeah, no, they're really great, and I'd highly recommend making the jump to DaVinci.
Yeah,
So that sounds great. So DaVinci is great for a number of reasons. One, it's got a really intuitive and fantastic color grading interface, and it started out as a color grading piece of software that was the industry standard for color grading. So it comes from a really strong place technologically anyway, and now they create cameras as well, which means if you're using their cameras, they work perfectly and seamlessly with their editing software. The editing software is a new development by them, which was has been advanced more and more so over the last few years, and has actually started to really take a hold on the market, because originally it's Final Cut Pro and Premiere Pro, but they're really expensive now, and they're only available as subscriptions. But one of the great things about DaVinci Resolve is you can actually get a free version, and I highly recommend anybody who's starting out their video journey to straight away just go and get it, because everyone loves a freebie, but also everyone loves a freebie that's actually a really brilliant, high quality piece of software and kit that's really going to elevate the quality of your films. And DaVinci really does. It's really catching up fast with Premiere Pro and Final Cut. So that's a great piece of software to get. And I'd also recommend actually getting the bought studio version, because they're one of the few people who also do a license that you can buy in perpetuity, because most people no longer do that. You have to get subscriptions. So they're really trying to help people out, or just trying to get as many people as they can on board so that they can then charge them lots of money later. But really good piece of software. And in terms of organizing your film clips, DaVinci is perfect for that, because there's a really great interface there in terms of how to manage your media. So when you open up the software itself, you'll see you've got different sections, and one is for your media, one is for audio, one is for edit, one is for coloring, one is for effects. And you won't need all of those things. Like, I only use DaVinci myself for color grading. But starting off in the media section for your own purposes will be really beneficial, because you can create bins, so which are basically just folders all in one place that you can go to as a reference point. So you can scrub through your footage and create these folders and place certain types of footage into each folder to help organize them, so that when it comes to actually being ready to edit, you can just take that folder from the media browser and put the whole thing directly onto your timeline to start scrubbing and looking through. So that's one way of helping organize your clips, and then looking at editing it. If you actually create different sequences for each of these bins as well, you can do things like leave notes on the footage and leave markers, and even use different colors to label your clips, to highlight ones which are stronger than others and which are really usable. So one thing I do is I have a 3-tier system, either green light, yellow light, red light thing, and I label them in that context for clips that are really good. Sometimes when I've got an interview that's 2-3 hours long, I'll need something like that, so when I come back to it, I can very quickly reference which answers were good and ignore the ones that are poor. So that's a really good route to go down in terms of organizing your clips, and also with labels, as you're going through it. If you're doing interview pieces, I would absolutely put subject titles, all the questions there on the timeline too. Otherwise, it's an absolute nightmare scrabbling through 3 hours worth of footage trying to find one specific question. Does that help?
That really does, yeah. I mean, that's the main thing that we're struggling with, because especially with COVID recently, my business partner's had to do loads of filming, and then I've had to edit it, and I haven't known what she's filmed. So I've just had like 2 hours worth of footage, and half of it is like just stuff to throw away straight away, and half of it's not, and it's just a bit messy. So yeah, if we can get ourselves organized, we'll be a lot more efficient. But we've managed to produce a whole course, and it's about 5 hours worth of footage in total. So we're doing something.
Well, that's amazing. Well, I definitely recommend taking it over to DaVinci and looking at that, because you can also use animated graphics and text and things like that to enhance it in there. And it's far more intuitive and slicker than iMovie. So that'll be a really good move for you, I think.